Hello, namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Donald Trump is in Davos. He's still talking about Greenland, but thankfully he now says he won't use force, at least for now. So has he given up his bid, or is this just a mood swing? Greenlanders are not waiting to find out. Their Prime Minister has told his people to prepare for a potential invasion. We'll bring you the full story. Meanwhile, Trump's speech was a long one. He unloaded at the World Economic Forum with complaints, grievances and attacks. And leading the pushback is Canada's Mark Carney. He says the rules-based order is a lie. Quite interesting, coming from a country that benefited handsomely from the old order. But now that it doesn't work for them, they're calling for an alliance of middle powers. The markets are watching all of this and they're falling. Sell America is back in focus. We'll explain. And as global confusion grows, one country is projecting calm, stability and momentum. And that's India at Davos. Also in focus, how Trump's one-year victory lap was a long, rambling speech. Will his Board of Peace to rebuild Gaza eventually replace the United Nations? Will Bangladesh be out of the T20 World Cup? It has one day to decide if it will play its matches in India. So all of this and more coming up. The headlines first. Uganda's opposition leader Bobi Wine speaks to Firstpost, calls President Yoweri Museveni's rule a dictatorship. Wine has been in hiding since the election results were announced last week. This is a Firstpost exclusive.
I am not a criminal. It is not a crime to run for president. It is not a crime to challenge his father's 40-year dictatorship. While all that is going on, I am not giving up. I'm not going to be intimidated.
The rupee hits a record low of 91.69 against the US dollar. Risk aversion over the Greenland dispute has been weighing down the currency. Today, the rupee suffered its biggest single session fall in 2 months. Other Asian currencies have also been caught between a weaker dollar and a softer risk appetite. Japan restarts the world's biggest nuclear plant for the first time since the 2011 Fukushima disaster. Last month, the regional governor had approved the resumption, but public opinion remains sharply divided. The facility was taken offline after an earthquake and a tsunami sent 3 reactors into meltdown in 2011. Russian President Vladimir Putin will meet US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff for talks tomorrow. Donald Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner will be accompanying Witkoff. This is the latest attempt by Washington to negotiate an end to the Ukraine war. The nearly 4-year-long war is Europe's deadliest conflict since World War II. The Philippines will end its ban on Elon Musk's Grok. Manila had blocked the AI chatbot less than a week ago over its ability to generate sexualized deepfakes. The decision comes after XAI agreed to modify the tool, which would prevent it from creating pornographic content. And Dipinder Goyal resigns as the CEO of Eternal, the parent company of Zomato. The move will come into effect from the 1st of February. Blinkit CEO Albinder Dhindsa will take over. Goyal says he took the decision as he wants to explore different ideas. He co-founded Eternal in 2008.
We need Greenland for national security.
Will America invade Greenland? 2 years ago, it would seem unthinkable and absurd. But now it's the most urgent question in the world, all because of one man, US President Donald Trump.
We need it for strategic national security and international security. This enormous unsecured island is actually part of North America, on the northern frontier of the Western Hemisphere. That's our territory. It is therefore a core national security interest of the United States of America.
That was Donald Trump speaking at the World Economic Forum at Davos, and he had a simple pitch. The US needs Greenland. Why? Because it's important for their national security, he says. It's a claim he has repeated multiple times, and the whole thing starts with a history lesson.
All the United States is asking for is a place called Greenland, where we already had it as a trustee, but respectfully returned it back to Denmark not long ago after we defeated the Germans, the Japanese, the Italians, and others in World War II. We gave it back to them.
Well, here's what happened. In 1940, Germany invaded Denmark. It was placed under Nazi occupation. Since Denmark still ruled Greenland, the US was concerned. They thought Germany would invade Greenland too, and that would give the Nazis a North American base. So during the Second World War, the US took over the defense of Greenland. It established 2 large air bases on this island. And after the war, after the Second World War, Washington offered to buy Greenland for $100 million. It's an offer that Denmark rejected. But in Trump's twisted logic, the US already had Greenland and they gave it back to Denmark. He said they shouldn't have. He said America should not have returned Greenland, and now he wants it back.
And all we're asking for is to get Greenland, including right title and ownership, because you need the ownership to defend it. You can't defend it on a lease. Number one, legally, it's not defensible that way, totally. And number two, psychologically, who the hell wants to defend a license agreement or a lease, which is a large piece of ice in the middle of the ocean where if there is a war, much of the action will take place on that piece of ice. Think of it. Those missiles would be flying right over the center of that piece of ice.
So Trump says he wants Greenland, but throughout his speech, he kept calling it Iceland. Is it just a slip of tongue? Or does Trump think that Greenland and Iceland are the same thing?
There for us. They're not there for us on Iceland, that I can tell you. I mean, our stock market took the first dip yesterday because of Iceland. So Iceland's already cost us a lot of money.
It should have been funny, but at this point, nobody's laughing. Greenland is spooked. It is preparing for an attack. The call has come from their prime minister. His name is Jens-Frederik Nielsen. He's telling his people to be prepared. Prepared for what? An American invasion.
It is not likely that there will be a use of military force, but it has not been ruled out yet. This leader from the other side has made it very clear that it is not ruled out, and therefore we must of course be prepared for everything. But we must emphasize that Greenland is part of the Western Alliance, NATO, and if there is further escalation, it will also have consequences for the entire outside world.
You heard what he's saying. He says a military conflict is not inevitable, but it cannot be ruled out. And while Trump wants the island does not want him. Greenland says it does not want to be part of the US, and it has said so multiple times. Its citizens have found a new way to make their point using a prop that Trump understands. Caps. They have these red caps that say, "Make America go away." They look like Trump's MAGA caps, but their message is a different MAGA. As you know, Greenland is an autonomous territory, but it's still a part of Denmark, and Denmark says it is not for sale. European powers support Denmark. They've tried every approach to drive home their point. They tried to play to Trump's ego. They tried to use logic. They even tried to show force by sending a grand total of 37 soldiers to Greenland. Of course, it became a joke. Then they tried to set up meetings with Trump, but Trump leaked their private messages on social media and ridiculed them. So now the Europeans are trying to sound tough. They're slamming the US president.
Of course, I see that there are these tensions at the moment. There's no doubt. Again, I'm not going to comment on that, but I can assure you the only way to deal with that is, in the end, thoughtful diplomacy.
We do believe that we need more growth, we need more stability in this world. But we do prefer respect to bullies, we do prefer science to plotism, and we do prefer rule of law to brutality.
Greenland is not just a territory in a key region of the world map and a land rich in critical raw materials, a strategic outpost on emerging global sea routes. It's all of these things. But above all, Greenland is home to a free and sovereign people. It is a nation with its sovereignty and its right to territorial integrity, and the future of Greenland is only for the Greenlanders to decide.
None of this has swayed Trump. He told the Norwegians that he is not obliged to think about peace because he did not get the Nobel Peace Prize. It's beyond absurd. Even Americans think that it's a terrible idea. According to a poll, 9 in 10 US voters say they're opposed to taking over Greenland using military action. 9 in 10 voters. But this is Donald Trump we're talking about.
But now what I'm asking for is a piece of ice, cold and poorly located, that can play a vital role in world peace and world protection. It's a very small ask compared to what we have given them for many, many decades. But the problem with NATO is that we'll be there for them 100%. But I'm not sure that they'd be there for us if we gave them the call.
And it's not just Donald Trump. Half of his administration is at Davos. It's the biggest US delegation in years, and they're all pushing for one thing: Greenland.
President Trump is serious here. Just as I said after Liberation Day last year, I would tell everyone, take a deep breath. Do not have this reflexive anger that we've seen and the bitterness. Why don't they sit down, wait for President Trump to get here and listen to his argument? Because I think they're going to be persuaded.
Right. I know the kind of effect this has had on the European view of the United States and the trade agreement. If the Europeans have decided that they're going to loop the trade agreement into Greenland, and they'll come back and say, well, no, you loop the trade agreement into this.
But rhetoric aside, is it really a possibility? Can Trump actually take Greenland? And how can he do it? The first and the most unlikely option, of course, is military action. Greenland is the world's largest island. 80% of it is ice. The population is nearly 58,000. Greenland also does not have its own army. It depends on Denmark for defense. Plus, the US has a military base there. They have boots on the ground. So technically, if Washington tried, if Washington wanted, it would be a pretty easy operation. They can pull it off in a matter of a few hours, but the consequences would be seismic. Taking Greenland by force would change the world as we know it. It would spell the end of NATO and international laws. But like I said, it's the most unlikely option, and Trump himself says he won't use force, at least for now.
We probably won't get anything unless I decide to use excessive strength and force where we would be, frankly, unstoppable. But I won't do that. Okay, now everyone's saying, oh, good. That's probably the biggest statement I made because people thought I would use force. I don't have to use force. I don't want to use force. I won't use force.
So what are his other options? One is buying Greenland. Some estimates say the island is worth $186 billion. Others say it's $50 billion. Whatever it is, the US has the money it can pay. But such a deal would need regulatory approval. Greenland and Denmark would have to agree, first of all. The US Congress would have to sign off. The European Union would have to approve it. It would be a long and complicated process. The other option is coercion, not military coercion. 85% of Greenlanders do not want to be part of the US, but more than 60% of them also want to leave Denmark. Can Washington sway them by offering financial or other incentives? The US has done this with island countries in the Pacific like Micronesia and Palau and the Marshall Islands too. They remain independent nations, but the US has access to their defense rights. Trump could do the same with Greenland. He's been eyeing their resources for some time now. So defense in exchange of resources is an option. But I guess the question at this point is not whether Trump can take Greenland and how he'll do it. The question is, what will the world do to stop him? Because if this goes on unchallenged, it would only be the beginning. If a democracy can be bought, bullied, or persuaded into submission, it sets the world on a very slippery slope. And Trump won't stop with this island. A Donald Trump speech is an experience. It ebbs and flows. It makes you laugh and fume. And most times it leaves you worried. Americans are used to his long, rambling speeches, but today his audience was the entire world. Trump turned up at the World Economic Forum in Davos just a short while ago. It was one of his most anticipated speeches. He has just toppled the president of Venezuela. He's threatening to take over Greenland. He's ripping up the free trade playbook. Basically, Trump is single-handedly reshaping the world order. So all eyes were naturally on his speech. Trump spoke for nearly 1 hour and 15 minutes. He began with his usual bluster. He claimed that America was the hottest country in the world. He also falsely claimed that inflation was easing. But after that, the complaints and attacks began. First on the line of fire was Europe. Trump attacked them. Trump attacked the Europeans on two fronts. One was their embrace of more migration, and two, their commitment to fight climate change. And as always, the language was crude.
Certain places in Europe are not even recognizable, frankly, anymore. They're not recognizable. And we can argue about it, but there's no argument. And I love Europe, and I want to see Europe go good. But it's not heading in the right direction. There are windmills all over Europe. There are windmills all over the place. And they are losers. One thing I've noticed is that the more windmills a country has, the more money that country loses and the worse that country is doing. And those countries have to do their thing. They have to get out of the culture that they've created over the last 10 years. It's horrible what they're doing to themselves. They're destroying themselves. It's beautiful, beautiful places. Without us, right now, you'd all be speaking German and a little Japanese, perhaps.
I'm sure the European leaders heard that. They are slated to meet Trump later today, but after those comments, it promises to be an awkward meeting. And Trump was not done yet, of course. After attacking Europe, he turned to his so-called peacemaking campaign. Trump once again claimed to have ended 8 wars, and once again, he included India and Pakistan in that list.
Working on this war for 1 year, during which time I settled 8 other wars. India, Pakistan, I settled other wars that were Vladimir Putin called me, Armenia, Azerbaijan. He said, I can't believe you settled that one. They were going on for 35 years. I settled it in 1 day. And President Putin called me. He said, you know, I can't believe I worked on that war for 10 years trying to settle it. I couldn't do it. I said, do me a favor, focus on settling your war. Don't worry about that one.
We did get a sense of Trump's worldview today. It is rooted in 2 very basic beliefs. Number 1, America has been wronged by the entire world. Whether it's on trade or security or energy, every other country got a nice deal, but America got the raw deal.
What does the United States get out of all of this work, all of this money, other than death, destruction, and massive amounts of cash going to people who don't appreciate what we do? They don't appreciate what we do. So what we have gotten out of NATO is nothing except to protect Europe from the Soviet Union and now Russia. I mean, we've helped them for so many years. We've never gotten anything.
He couldn't be more wrong. The fact is, America created the current world order, and they created it to benefit themselves. Free trade helped the US, the petrodollar helped the US, the IMF and the World Bank helped the US. So what is Trump complaining about? And only he knows. Anyway, that's his firm belief that America has been wronged. His second belief is that America is entitled to whatever it wants, whether that's Greenland or Canada or tariffs. They can have whatever they want because might is right. Again, this is a worrying worldview because Trump is not just any world leader. He commands the most powerful military on the planet. What happens if he puts this worldview into effect? Greenland, like I said, may just be the start. Of course, no Trump speech is complete without insults. Trump unloaded on his predecessor, Joe Biden. He also mocked French President Macron and his sunglasses in Davos.
Biden and his allies destroyed our economy. and gave us perhaps the worst inflation in American history. They say 48 years, I say forever, but I think 48 years is the equivalent to forever. Whether it's 48 years or ever, it's terrible, costing the typical family $33,000. What they did to this country should never, ever be forgotten. It's early, but he has to be rated as the worst president we've ever had by far. The auto pen did much of the damage. The auto pen, he was the auto pen president, because I don't believe a sane president would have ever signed the kind of things that he signed. So when I called up Emmanuel Macron, I watched him yesterday with those beautiful sunglasses. What the hell happened?
The World Economic Forum is a global event, yet Trump spent a lot of time talking about domestic issues. He talked about inflation, he spoke about interest rates, and he promised to announce a new central bank chair. Now, this is very important because it reveals Trump's only vulnerability, perhaps his Achilles heel. And that's the domestic sentiment back home in America. Trump's claims are simply not true. 74% of Americans feel the president is not doing enough to contain inflation. 90% oppose taking over Greenland. This week, his approval ratings hit a new low. Around 57% Americans disapprove of President Donald Trump, and he knows that. Yesterday marked Trump's one-year anniversary in office. He turned up at the press conference with a so-called Book of Achievements. He said the same things yesterday too. Some trash on Biden, fake claims about inflation and jobs, and endless praise of tariffs. But the truth is, this charade is running its course. It's not just the world that is souring on Trump. His own people are fed up of him. And President Trump knows this. You could sense that vulnerability in his speech today. The question is he using issues like Greenland to hide those fears? Trump's speech was certainly off-brand for Davos. It is usually known for rousing messages. We've heard promises of unity, we've heard messages of peace, we've seen pledges of support. But yesterday, we saw something very different. Not some message of optimism, but a warning of chaos, a brutal, blunt warning. And it came from Canada's Prime Minister, Mark Carney. He began with a bold declaration. We often hear Western leaders talk about a rules-based order. It was led by the United States, and on paper it was liberal and rooted in the rule of law. But Carney says that system is fading, and it's not transitioning into something else, it's just rupturing.
For decades, countries like Canada prospered under what we called the rules-based international order. We joined its institutions, we praised its principles, we benefited from its predictability. And because of that, we could pursue values-based foreign policies under its protection. This bargain no longer works. Let me be direct. We are in the midst of a rupture, not a transition. But more recently, great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons. Tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited.
Carney also made a big admission. We always knew that this rules-based order was a farce. The West applied it wherever they could, but the powerful, well, they openly violated it. If you were weak and vulnerable, you had to follow the order. If you're powerful and independent, you could do whatever you want. This was the reality of the so-called rules-based order. And for a change, the Prime Minister of Canada admitted it.
We knew the story of the international rules-based order was partially false. That the strongest would exempt themselves when convenient. That trade rules were enforced asymmetrically. And we knew that international law applied with varying rigor depending on the identity of the accused or the victim. This fiction was useful. And American hegemony in particular helped provide public goods, open sea lanes, a stable financial system, collective security, and support for frameworks for resolving disputes. So we placed the sign in the window.
We appreciate the frankness. It's almost jarring to hear a Western leader speak like this, that to a Canadian Prime Minister, because Canada has benefited from the US-led order. They supported American wars, they fought against America's enemies, and in return, the country prospered. Just look at Carney's predecessor, Justin Trudeau. He was a huge supporter of this rules-based order. But unlike Trudeau, Carney seems to be a pragmatist. He sees the threat at his door, an imperialist US president who does not care about the international law. So does Carney have a solution? Well, he's betting on middle powers to come together.
Argue the middle powers must act together because if we're not at the table, we're on the menu. But I'd also say that great powers can afford for now to go it alone. They have the market size, the military capacity, and the leverage to dictate terms. Middle powers do not. But when we only negotiate bilaterally with a hegemon, we negotiate from weakness. We accept what's offered. We compete with each other to be the most accommodating. This is not sovereignty. It's the performance of sovereignty while accepting subordination. In a world of great power rivalry, the countries in between have a choice: compete with each other for favor or to combine to create a third path with impact.
So who are these middle powers? Countries like India, Saudi Arabia, Canada and Brazil. They have significant economic and military potential. Alone they cannot take on the US, but Carney says together they can. And he's rooting this approach in two things. One is principles, the other is pragmatism. Carney says he will stand for principles like sovereignty and human rights. At the same time, he admits that not every partner will share the same values. And that sometimes, in fact, interests will diverge. We've seen this policy in motion. Carney has reset his relations with India. He's looking to sign a free trade deal with New Delhi. And last week, he also visited China. Both these relationships were fraught under his predecessor, Trudeau. But Carney is looking at a new chapter. He wants to build new coalitions and partnerships. And frankly, he doesn't have an option right now. Trump may be focused on Greenland for the moment, but Canada is also on his radar. On Monday, Trump posted this AI image on social media. It shows Canada as part of the United States of America. Even the Canadian military is taking this threat seriously. Reports say they are modeling a response to a hypothetical US invasion. And what does it show? The US could overpower Canadian positions in 2 days. So Canada's plan is to use non-conventional warfare, things like ambushes and hit and runs. I know US invasion is extremely unlikely, but this mere conversation was unthinkable until last year. And that explains Carney's urgency. We heard similar messages from the French president too.
It's as well a shift towards a world without rules, where international law is trampled underfoot, and where the only law that seems to matter is that of the strongest, and imperial ambitions are resurfacing.
I know it's hard to take him seriously with those glasses, but the message stands. The rules-based order was pinned on the United States, on the power of the US military, on the openness of the US economy, on the influence of the US dollar, and on the proximity between the US and Europe. All those things are cracking. And they're cracking because of Washington. The US military is not a tool of deterrence anymore. It has been used to invade countries and topple regimes. The US economy is not open anymore. It is imposing tariffs and shutting off imports. The US dollar is not reliable as a currency anymore. It has been weaponized to throttle rivals. Some rivals have been sanctioned, others have been cut off from global banking. And finally, the US-Europe proximity is gone. Washington is threatening to invade European soil on Greenland. And no, Trump did not cause this. He only accelerated it. The question is, what happens next? In public, US allies are talking tough. We've heard strong statements, especially on tariffs and Greenland.
The European Union and the United States have agreed to a trade deal last July. And in politics, as in business, a deal is a deal. And when friends shake hands, it must mean something. And in my view, the seismic change we are going through today is an opportunity, in fact, a necessity, to build a new form of European independence.
Tariffs benefit no one, and harm almost everyone. American consumers are now noticing the effects of tariffs. The American economy is not performing as well as the American government had anticipated a year ago. If we are confronted with tariffs that we consider unreasonable, we are in a position to respond.
These are bold statements to make, but will they walk the talk? Will these leaders put pragmatism over ideals? Will they prioritize stability over alliances? At the end of the day, Europe has not imposed counter tariffs. Instead, they are pursuing talks with Donald Trump. So even now, there is a clear gulf between their tough statements and their appeasing moves. Whether that will change is the big question.
We need Greenland for national protection. One way or the other, we're going to get it. You know what Denmark did recently to boost up security in Greenland? They added one more dog sled.
Donald Trump's threats have taken their first casualty, the American stock market. Even before the US president landed in Davos, Wall Street witnessed a fall yesterday, and a sharp one. It was the worst day for US stocks since October 2025. The S&P 500 dropped by more than 2% in a single day. This index tracks America's top 500 companies. Similarly, the Dow Jones was down by 1.8%. It represents America's top 30 companies. The tech-heavy Nasdaq fell 2.4%. These numbers may appear small, but they represent billions of dollars in market value. Effectively, the US markets wiped out all the gains they'd made in 2026 so far. But the impact was not limited to stocks. The dollar, too, showed signs of weakness. It fell by almost 1%. This is against a basket of global currencies like the euro, the British pound, the Japanese yen, and the Canadian dollar. So the greenback, that's the US dollar, is getting weaker compared to its global peers. Clearly, a sell-off is underway. Today, there was some minor recovery, but the investors are rushing to safety. That trend is quite clear. They're turning to assets like gold. Yesterday, gold surged past $4,700. This is for 1 ounce of gold. That's 31 grams. $4,700 for 1 ounce. It's a new record for the yellow metal. And just like gold, silver too hit an all-time high. It was trading above $95 for an ounce yesterday. There was a slight correction later, but silver is still trading between 94 and 95. And this has been the trend for a while. Investors are picking gold over stocks. Even central banks have been buying it. They've been amassing gold for some time now. But Trump's threats on Greenland have accelerated the shift. And this gold rush reflects the larger sentiment because experts say the sell America trend is back. Investors are pulling out of US assets at large, not just US stocks. And if Trump continues to threaten Europe over Greenland, the markets could take a beating further. Because Europe can retaliate by dumping American assets too. In fact, that too has already begun. This week, a major Danish pension fund pulled out of the US. They hold about $100 million in US debt. This fund has decided to unwind its position. They're selling this American debt. The fund says it will be sold by the end of this month. It is the opposite of what the Trump administration wanted. Yesterday in Davos, two top Trump officials tried to calm nerves. One was Howard Lutnick, the US Commerce Secretary. He dismissed talk of a new trade war. He called Trump's tactics diplomacy.
You have seen him use tariff policy again and again to have outcomes that are reasonable and appropriate. So the fact that he doesn't want things to be done without discussion and without consideration is a way for him to say, hey, you need to talk to us. Globalization has failed the West and the United States of America. It's a failed policy. The fact is, it has left America behind. It has left the American workers behind.
Lutnick was trying to win over his audience. He said Trump is using tariffs for reasonable and appropriate outcomes. At the same time, he attacked the very idea of globalization, saying that it had failed America. Now, when you frame your pitch like that, it's hardly reassuring. Next up was Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. He urged Europe to not escalate. He said, take a deep breath and let things play out. He insisted that Europe would not retaliate by selling U.S. debt.
If you look, the U.S. Treasury market was the best performing market in the world, or the best G7 performing bond market, and we had the best performance since 2020. It is the most liquid market. It is the basis for all financial transactions, and I am sure that the European governments will continue holding it.
Well, Denmark is clearly not on board, and other European players may do the same. And this decoupling will be painful for all sides because their economic ties run deep. The US and the European Union are top trade partners. In 2024, their trade was worth nearly $2 trillion. This was for both goods and services, $2 trillion. It accounted for 1/3 of all global trade. And the US-EU convergence is not limited to trade, of course. European members of NATO are investors in US government debt. They hold $2.8 trillion in US bonds. There is a wider economic dependence as well. Overall, Europeans have invested more than $12 trillion in American financial assets, $12 trillion. This includes US stocks, government debt, and other forms of private investment. Even if most of those holdings are not government-owned, Europe holds significant leverage over the United States, and Denmark could already be using this leverage. So Sell America is making a comeback. It's a clear sign that global confidence in America's leadership is cracking. All the Davos headlines tomorrow will carry Donald Trump, which is not really surprising. Chaos often does lead to headlines. But the world economy does not need chaos right now. What it needs is momentum and reliability. And that is what India has taken to Davos. This year's delegation is the largest that India has ever sent. At least 4 union ministers, 6 chief ministers, more than 100 CEOs. It's a large and power-packed delegation. Their goal is not just to strike deals or hold talks. Their goal is to sell India's growth story. And along the way, also correct some wrong perceptions. We saw that during one of the sessions today. It covered AI power plays in the world. India was represented by IT Minister Ashwini Vaishnav. Also on the panel was the IMF chief. Now, the IMF has classified India among the second group of AI powers, and that's something that Minister Vaishnav pushed back against.
So, Ashwini, incredible talent base, fastest growing major economy in the world, an AI player, but clearly in the second grouping that Kristalina is talking about.
Actually, clearly in the first group, and the reason for that is there are 5 layers in the AI architecture. The application layer, the model layer, the chip layer, the infra layer, and the energy layer. We are working on all the 5 layers, making very good progress in all the 5 layers. And I don't know what the IMF criteria has been, but Stanford places India as 3rd in terms of AI penetration, in terms of AI preparedness, and in terms of AI talent. All the 3, actually on AI talent it is number 2. So I don't think your classification in the second bouquet is right. It's actually in the first.
India's case is not a hard one. We are the fastest growing major economy in the world. The same IMF has just upgraded our forecast from 6.6% growth to 7.3% in the current fiscal. So the Indian economy is actually gaining momentum. At the same time, we are opening up. India has signed a free trade deal with the UK. It has concluded a deal with New Zealand. Another deal with the European Union is expected soon, and talks are underway with Canada. Meanwhile, at home, the reform push continues. Last year, that is 2025, was billed as the year of reforms. We saw major changes to our labor laws. We saw changes to the GST structure, to nuclear regulations, space regulation, foreign investment. New Delhi's goal is to sell these reforms at Davos to show that India is open for business. Today, there was a special session on India's economy. It was titled, Can India Become the 3rd Largest Economy? Again, IT Minister Ashwini Vaishnav was in attendance, and his answer was an emphatic yes.
India will become the 3rd largest economy in the coming few years itself. It's not a question of will it become, it's certainly, that's a certainty that will happen. It's a question of within next few years, we will definitely become the third largest economy. What's working very well is the last decade of very transformational change which has happened in our country, and it's a very well thought through, well defined and very focused execution.
Right now, India is the fourth largest economy in the world. The US, China and Germany rank ahead of India. Germany is growing at around 1%. India is growing at 7 to 8%. So mathematically, this is not even a debate. It's only a question of when India will overtake. And that's where economist Geeta Gopinath chimed in. She says India could overtake Germany by 2028, maybe even before that, once India adjusts its GDP calculations. At the same time, she identified a few challenges too, like land acquisition and skilling.
It is a tremendous challenge in India to acquire land, to have clean land titles. And that is a constraint on growth. It is a constraint on manufacturing. Judicial reforms, I think, are absolutely critical. That is a very important bottleneck for growth in India. We've been talking about the demographic dividend in India for a long time. But if you look at the contribution of labor to growth in India since the 1980s, only about 30% of India's growth has come from labor. So it is a fairly capital-intensive production structure that India has.
Indian CEOs will also be in focus tonight. US President Donald Trump is hosting a special reception, and a number of Indian business leaders have been invited, like the chairman of Tata Sons, the chief of the Mahindra Group, the CEO of Infosys, the CEO of Wipro, and the chairman of Bajaj Financial Services. Remember, the same Trump called the Indian economy dead. But now he is wooing Indian businessmen. It's the result of India's rapid growth, and that's the focus of New Delhi's delegation in Davos. The IT minister has ruled out any trade talks on the sidelines. He wants to solely focus on India's growth journey, on our reforms, on the technological edge, and our expanding public infrastructure. To that end, the minister also had an idea. He is proposing an autumn Davos to be hosted in India. Now, autumn runs from September to November. The minister is proposing to hold a World Economic Forum event during that time here in India. Again, it tells you what India's goal is. Here we have world leaders skipping Davos. We have leaders talking geopolitics instead of economics, yet India is doubling down. India is reaffirming its commitment to globalization, free trade and progress. Maybe the so-called world powers should take note. 1 year into his second term, Donald Trump returned to a familiar stage, the White House briefing room. But this was not about taking questions. It was not about defending policies. It was not even about convincing critics. This was a victory lap. Nearly 2 hours of Trump, uninterrupted, unfiltered, very on brand. What unfolded was less a press conference and more a political spectacle. And in that spectacle, Trump made one thing quite clear. He believes that this presidency is just getting started. Our next report has more.
One year in, second term. Donald Trump walked back into the White House briefing room for a victory lap. What followed was not a press conference. It was a performance for almost 2 hours. It had threats. It had a binder of wins. And more importantly, it had a president telling the world, "This is my moment." Trump wasn't there to answer questions. He was there to grade himself. He flipped through pages of what his team calls 365 wins in 365 days. Each sheet, a day, a claim, a victory.
Here's the book. These are all things we have. I'm going to read a few of the samples, but look at this. These are all, each line is something that we did. Nobody did that before. And it's big stuff, too. Look, we have the hottest country in the world.
Border numbers, economic growth, crime crackdowns, regulations rolled back, even on things like shower heads and toilets. At one point, he jokes about a binder clip being so strong it could have hurt him. An insignificant moment, but very Trump.
Ooh, I'm glad my finger wasn't in that sucker. They could have done some damage, but you know what? I wouldn't have shown the pain. I would have gone back. What, did you hear that? That was nasty. But I would not have shown the pain. I would have acted like nothing happened as my finger fell off.
If there was one subject Trump kept circling back to, It was immigration, especially Minnesota. He praised federal agents as patriots. He condemned protesters as agitators and defended one of the most aggressive immigration crackdowns of any presidency. He even brought visual props, mugshots, holding them up, naming crimes, and then tossing them aside.
So this is what the people are trying to protect, because all ICE wants to do is get them out of our country, bring them to prisons and jails and mental institutions from where they came. That's all they want to do.
And then it was back to his favorite obsession, the Nobel Peace Prize.
Should have gotten the Nobel Prize for each war, but I don't say that. I say millions and millions of people. And don't let anyone tell you that Norway doesn't control the shots, okay? It's in Norway. Norway controls the shots. They'll say, we have nothing to do with it. It's a joke. They've lost such prestige.
Truly a case of sour grapes right there. And staying on the same note of self-obsession, Trump says he had another name for the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of Trump.
I said, why is it the Gulf of Mexico? It should be the Gulf of America. I was going to call it the Gulf of Trump, but I thought that I would be killed if I did that. I wanted to do it.
Then came the question that only Trump could answer the way he did. Is God proud of him? Trump didn't hesitate. He says the answer is yes. He framed his presidency as divinely approved.
I do, actually. I think God is very proud of the job I've done.
So what was this press conference really about? It wasn't about reconciliation or retaliation. It was Donald Trump, 1 year into his second term, telling the world he isn't done reshaping the rules. From Greenland to Minnesota, from NATO to the Nobel Prize, from God to global trade. This wasn't just a review of 1 year. It was a preview of what Trump believes the next 3 will look like. Unpredictable, confrontational, and very, very Trump.
For our next story, I want you to imagine geopolitics as a board game. What do you do when you have a board game? You invite friends, you play by the rules mostly, but then one friend loses or doesn't like the game, so he gets a new one, a board game that works according to his rules. That is Donald Trump right now. He has spent years calling the United Nations useless, and now he's trying to build an alternative. He calls it the Board of Peace.
Do you want your Board of Peace to replace the UN?
Well, it might. I mean, the UN just hasn't been very helpful. I'm a big fan of the UN potential, but it has never lived up to its potential. The UN should have settled every one of the wars that I settled. I never went to them. I never even thought to go to them. They should be able to settle those wars. They don't. I believe you got to let the UN continue because the potential is so great.
So what is this Board of Peace about? The original idea was to oversee the rebuilding of Gaza, or so we thought, but then the world saw the fine print and they figured that this was not just about Gaza. It was not just about one region. This Board of Peace was about global conflicts everywhere in the world, basically wherever Trump decides the board should look. And here's the first big twist. This board has a chairman. Guess who? Donald J. Trump. Already you can see where this is going. On paper, it sounds noble. Stability, lawful governance, enduring peace, the kind of words you'd expect in an international charter. But then you see the power structure. Trump chairs the board. Trump controls it. He gets exclusive authority to create new bodies, to change them, and to scrap them if he does not like. What about replacing him? Well, that can only happen if he resigns or he becomes incapacitated. So this is less like the UN General Assembly and more like Trump's War and Peace room. And here's where the board game analogy really kicks in. If you want a seat at the table, you have to be invited by the US president. Your membership technically lasts for 3 years, unless, of course, you choose to pay. If you pay more than $1 billion in cash, you get lifetime membership. That's right. It's peace, but make it premium. Although the White House says the money is voluntary, they've invited about 50 leaders to join. And guess what? 35 have already said yes. Tells you a lot about our world, doesn't it? Anyway, the guest list is eclectic. You have America's close allies, or whatever is left of them. You have strongmen. You have democracies and autocracies, all in the same room. Israel, the UAE, Bahrain, Belarus and Hungary are among those who have said yes. Russia and Ukraine have both been invited. So what if they're fighting a war? They can join Trump's Board of Peace. If you buy oil from Putin, Trump will sanction you, but he himself will invite Putin to his club. Hypocrisy does not even cover it anymore. India too has been invited to join, so has Pakistan. Some countries have refused to join, like Norway and France.
Response to President Macron saying he will not join the Board of Peace?
Oh, did he say that? Well, nobody wants him because he's going to be out of office very soon. So, that's all right. What I'll do is if they feel like Costo, I'll put a 200% tariff on his wines and champagnes, and he'll join. But he doesn't have to join. If he said that, you're probably giving it to me a little bit differently. But if he actually did say that, but as you know, he's going to be out of office in a few months.
Apparently, that's how peace works now. And then there's China. China got the invite too, but they say they're committed to the current world order, aka the UN-led global system.
We have no intention of competing with any country for influence. We always believe that regardless of how the international situation may change, it is in the common interest of all countries in the international community to uphold the international system with the United Nations at its core, the international order based on international law, and the basic norms of international relations based on the purposes and principles of the UN Charter.
And that brings us to the biggest question in this story. Is this board meant to replace the United Nations? Officially, no. Politically, maybe. I say this because this is essentially a parallel system, a smaller club with handpicked members, no veto complications, no General Assembly speeches that nobody listens to anyway. Just Trump, a table, and a bunch of countries willing to play by his rules. This is classic Trump, victim syndrome and all. He's always believed that multilateral institutions are stacked against him. So he wants to build a new system. Will it work? Well, that depends on how long it can sustain Trump's interest, how seriously the world takes it, and what it delivers in a crisis. The United Nations, as we've always said, is deeply flawed, but it still has something that this board does not: universality. Also, peace is not a board game. You can't just redesign when you don't like the rules. So will this new game end in diplomacy, or will it flip the table entirely? We can only wait and watch. Now to Bangladesh, where cricket is no longer a game. It's a mess of boycotts, politics and panic. The clock is ticking. Bangladesh has 1 day left to decide if it will play its World Cup matches in India. India is hosting the T20 World Cup this year. Sri Lanka is the co-host. Bangladesh wants its matches shifted out of India. The ICC met today. That's the International Cricket Council, the body that governs global cricket, and it pushed back Dhaka's demand. Reports say the matter went to a vote, and Bangladesh was given a day to decide if it will play in India. If not, it could be replaced by Scotland. Meanwhile, there is chaos in Bangladesh cricket. Last week, players began a boycott. A top official questioned their salaries. That comment led to outrage. The official has since been removed, but the anger has not subsided. You see, Bangladesh tried to make cricket political, but it's not playing out as they hoped. Our next report has more.
The risk is real. Bangladesh may not play the T20 World Cup, and that has cast a shadow over the entire tournament. India and Sri Lanka are co-hosting the event, but Bangladesh has refused to play its group matches in India. They want the fixtures shifted to Sri Lanka, citing security concerns. But this is not just about safety. Behind the scenes, politics is taking center stage. Last week, it escalated. Bangladesh's players launched a boycott. All forms of cricket were halted. The trigger? A remark from one of their own. A senior board director suggested that players should bear the cost of skipping the World Cup. His name is M. Nazmul Islam. He was the chair of the board's finance committee, and his words caused uproar. That statement lit a fire in Dhaka. The players pushed back. The Cricketers' Welfare Association of Bangladesh called it unacceptable. The impact was immediate. Matches in the Bangladesh Premier League were postponed, and World Cup preparations are now in chaos. Bangladesh's captain Litin Das summed it up well. He said, "From where I stand, I am uncertain. Everyone is uncertain. I think at this moment, the whole of Bangladesh is uncertain." The row began when a star bowler from Bangladesh was dropped from the IPL. Mustafizur Rahman was removed by the Kolkata Knight Riders. The decision came from the BCCI, and it triggered this diplomatic spiral. Now even Pakistan is weighing in. The PCB has backed Bangladesh's demand to not play in India. They've written to the ICC asking it to consider the regional turmoil. All of Pakistan's fixtures will be played in Sri Lanka. Bangladesh is seeking a similar arrangement, with barely less than a month to go for the tournament. But here's the bottom line. This is not an IPL franchise row. This is the World Cup. And Dhaka is holding it hostage over domestic politics, which is heating up. Tomorrow, formal campaigning begins for Bangladesh's parliamentary election. It is expected to be one of the most tightly contested polls in years. Candidates have received their polling symbols, but the political climate remains tense. The Election Commission has confirmed withdrawals, but the final list of candidates is yet to come out. Security is tight, concerns are growing, and India is watching closely. While there is little proof to justify Dhaka's security concerns over India, in Bangladesh there is a clear and present risk for the Indian mission. Last month, New Delhi summoned Bangladesh's High Commissioner in India and delivered a clear message. The security situation in Dhaka is deteriorating. Protests have taken place outside the Indian High Commission, and now India has asked families of Indian diplomats to return ahead of the elections. The signs are serious. This is no longer just a sporting standoff. It is a regional flashpoint, and it is unfolding both on the pitch and off it.
Red carpet, check. Ribbon cutting, check. Senior ministers in attendance, check. Pakistan's Defence Minister Khwaja Asif recently inaugurated what was announced as a new Pizza Hut outlet in the Sialkot cantonment. Except there was a problem. Pizza Hut Pakistan says it had absolutely nothing to do with it. It wasn't a franchise, it was a fake. Looks like Pakistan's national defence now comes with extra unverified cheese. Take a look. And now it's time for Vantage shots, images that tell the story. Satellite imagery shows the moment a large coronal mass ejection erupted from the sun. Ukrainians build rainbow igloos after heavy snow in Lviv. And a chimpanzee celebrates its second birthday with a big party at a Spanish zoo. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1976, the first Concorde commercial flights took off. The Concorde was a supersonic aircraft built in collaboration by Britain and France. It did not end up being a commercial success, with people complaining about loud noises. A deadly crash in the year 2000 sealed its fate. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
The world doesn't fit in boxes, so why should your news? From battlefields to negotiation tables, from internet outrage to real-world injustice. The conversations everyone is having and the ones they're avoiding. It's the same show, but this new year, Firstpost America gets a new look. I'm Kerry Johnston, and this is Firstpost America.